The atmosphere shifts the absolute moment an awakened soul steps into a space, projecting an innate authority that requires no grand gestures or booming announcements to command attention. You carry an internal compass so finely calibrated that it naturally disrupts the fabricated narratives and carefully constructed facades of those who thrive on superficial validation. For a long time, the individuals around you misread your deep introspection as a sign of passivity, entirely failing to comprehend that your stillness was a period of intense observation and architectural planning for your own personal evolution. They projected their own insecurities onto your quiet demeanor, whispering behind closed doors and tracking your progress through anonymous avenues, because your refusal to participate in their shallow social competitions made them deeply uncomfortable. Your heightened perception allowed you to map out their behavioral patterns and decipher their true intentions long before they even recognized their own motivations, turning every underestimation into valuable psychological data. Now that the trajectory of your life has shifted upward, those same critics are forced to watch from the sidelines, attempting to rewrite history by pretending they always supported your vision, while struggling to process how the dynamics flipped entirely outside of their influence. This digital space serves as a literal beacon for minds functioning on that identical elevated frequency, an algorithmic signal that the era of hiding your true capabilities has officially come to an end. The heavy awareness you carried since youth, which you once misidentified as psychological distress or isolating alienation, was actually the early manifestation of an extraordinary accuracy in reading human energy fields. Deceit simply cannot exist comfortably in your proximity. You do not actively seek to unmask anyone, yet human fragility automatically shatters when forced to stand near your absolute transparency. They attempted to label your acute sensitivity as emotional frailty, desperately hoping you would doubt your own internal radar, while they chased fleeting recognition built on structural compromises. You were never operating within their rigid framework. You were a rogue element dismantling the very architecture of their systemic expectations by entirely outgrowing the frequency they exist upon. This journey is defined by a profound gravitational weight rather than loud exhibitionism, establishing an undeniable presence that effortlessly bends the room toward your calm center. The universe does not equip highly evolved individuals with a need for theatrical dominance. Instead, it endows them with an inescapable reality that forces others to confront their own fractured identities in the reflection you provide. Your survival and subsequent rise do not stem from mere environmental fortuity or random privilege, but from an unwavering alignment with universal laws that automatically penalizes those who attempted to compromise your trajectory. While they operated in a state of chaotic desperation, you mastered the discipline of emotional neutrality, allowing the natural consequences of time to dissolve their fabrications far more effectively than any direct retaliation ever could. They are deeply rattled by your effortless recovery, paying a continuous mental toll of anxiety because your silence leaves them perpetually guessing about the true depth of what you know. Mediocrity will always attempt to dilute exceptional intensity, branding it as eccentric or unapproachable simply because it lacks the capacity to mirror that level of spiritual synchronization. Your current reality is not a sudden stroke of fortune, but a direct consequence of enduring silent refinement cycles in the dark, turning every obstacle into structural concrete for an unreachable personal empire. They threw obstacles at your path, without realizing they were providing the exact raw materials required to forge an unbreakable foundation, transforming their criticism into a powerful engine for your development. You exist in an entirely separate category, where competition is structurally impossible, leaving them to endlessly debate your evolution in group chats, while you focus on constructing entirely new personal galaxies. Maintain that sovereign composure and allow your quiet progress to serve as an unspoken warning to anyone still trapped in the illusion of control. Your existence requires absolutely no defense or external validation because the architecture of your life is already the ultimate proof. Never mistake a period of strategic withdrawal for a permanent retreat, as the quietest phases of preparation are simply the sound of an unstoppable momentum gathering strength before a major breakthrough. The individuals who attempted to manipulate your circumstances genuinely believed you were an easy target, convincing themselves that your polite demeanor and refusal to engage in petty arguments meant you would perpetually tolerate their subtle disrespect. They built an entire system of illusions, confidently dancing on a foundation of half-truths, while completely failing to realize that your stillness was a calculated gathering of operational intelligence. Now that the structural cracks in their plans are fully visible, they are learning the hard way that true authority does not need to shout to completely rearrange the surrounding environment. While they were busy performing for temporary applause, you were deciphering their operational blueprint page by page until you could accurately predict their decisions before they even formulated them. You transitioned from a baseline of compliance to a state of complete self-mastery, a shift that envious minds always mischaracterize as arrogance because they can no longer access or control your energy. They assumed you were easily expendable, yet they now find themselves caught in a perpetual loop of comparison, turning your name into a permanent standard of excellence they can neither replicate nor replace. Your strategic distance was never a sign of defeat. It was the construction of an entirely new board where they were merely uncompensated actors playing roles in a scenario you subconsciously structured from the beginning. This is precisely why their peace is disrupted, because deep within their consciousness, they recognize that they attempted to break an individual who operates on an entirely different level of resilience. Genuine power does not strike back with chaotic emotional outbursts. It remains anchored in absolute truth and allows the natural laws of cause and effect to execute justice with flawless precision. Every underhanded move made against your progress effectively served as a binding contract for their own eventual stagnation, as the universe consistently preserves structural integrity over superficial deception. You do not require a grand stage to witness your victory, because watching you flourish in absolute serenity is the most profound consequence those who doubted you could ever face. Your growth lives permanently in their thoughts, generating a background static of insecurity every time your calm progression highlights the noisy desperation of their unrefined lifestyles. Their inability to meet your gaze directly is a subconscious acknowledgement of this spiritual hierarchy, as your absolute honesty makes their internal compromises feel incredibly exposed. They wanted to convince you that you were the problem, but today they are left holding the pieces of a narrative that absolutely no one in their circle finds believable anymore. You have completely bypassed their cognitive tracking, leaving them to label your journey as an enigma simply because they cannot comprehend an evolution forged in fires they lacked the courage to endure. They tried to bury your potential in the dirt, completely ignorant of the fact that you possess a nature designed to convert environmental pressure into exponential structural growth. Every insult was transformed into free promotion for your capabilities, and every deliberate delay only served to sharpen your operational efficiency for the chapters ahead. Let them continue to distribute their rumors. Every fabrication is merely a public confession of their inability to match your frequency or enter the elite category you have established. Walk forward with that quiet authority, knowing that the universe is actively rearranging the macrocosm to reflect the profound discipline you maintain throughout your silent seasons. And no, you didn't imagine their energy shift, that tension when you walk in, that uneasy shuffle, that fake laugh. That's their spirit recognizing what their ego denies. You expose people just by being yourself. You make dishonesty sweat, That's why they avoid your eyes. Your gaze is too honest for their comfort. You don't call out lies. You make them crumble. They told you you're too intense, too deep, too much. That's what mediocrity says when faced with someone it can't dilute. You see patterns, energy, motives, things they can't admit even to themselves. You were built for awareness, not approval. And that's exactly what terrifies them, because you know more than you let on, and you let on just enough to keep them guessing. Now look around. The ones who mocked your intuition, they're falling apart, tripping over the very traps they set for you. The ones who tried to frame you as the problem, they're stuck explaining stories that no one believes anymore. That's how the universe works for the chosen. It doesn't announce justice. It delivers it quietly. You're not just ahead of them. You're beyond them. You outgrew their frequency. They're still gossiping in circles while you're building galaxies. That's why they call you mysterious, because they can't track your evolution. They don't understand it, so they label it. But you've stopped existing for their understanding. You exist for truth, for purpose, for impact. They tried to throw dirt on your name. Didn't realize you were the soil everything grows from. They tried to dim your light. Forgot that you are the current, not the bulb. They tried to break you and instead built your legend. Every attempt to weaken you only trained your strength. Every insult was a free advertisement for your power. They'll keep whispering about you. Let them. Every whisper is a confession. Every rumor a reflection. Because deep down they know they were never your equals. You were never in competition. You were a category they couldn't enter. And that's the real reason they can't stop talking. They're still trying to understand how the story flipped without their permission. So walk forward with that villain calm. Let your silence hum like a warning. The ones who betrayed you already hear the echo of what's coming. Not from you, but from the universe rearranging everything in your favor. Don't chase validation. Don't explain. The loudest revenge is peace that looks effortless. You are not what they said you were. You're what they feared you'd become. And now you are. You're the flame they mocked until it burned down their illusions. They played with fire and learned too late. You were the fire all along. Number 2, when the stars move, you don't chase, you align. Call it coincidence if it comforts you. But deep down, everyone knows destiny doesn't miss its target twice. They keep calling it luck because that's easier than admitting you were right. It's easier than facing the fact that every time they tried to block your path, the universe simply redrew the map. Imagine this. Someone spends months building walls around you, thinking they've trapped you, only to realize they accidentally built a fortress for your protection. That's what alignment looks like. It's not random. It's poetic. Every betrayal, every delay, every loss was choreography, and you were the lead. They're obsessed with explaining your rise. Oh, they just got lucky. Right place, right time. Yeah, sure. Keep telling yourselves that while everything keeps turning in your favor without you breaking a sweat. You don't stumble into alignment. You earn it through patience, silence, and the kind of discipline no one gives credit for until it's too late. You know what they'll never understand? That you didn't fight for control. You surrendered it. You stopped chasing what wasn't flowing toward you and started listening to what was. And suddenly, everything that used to feel forced began to fall into place like it was waiting for your permission. That's not luck. That's intelligence on a cosmic level. That's what happens when you stop begging for timing and start becoming timing. You can't outplan someone who moves with the rhythm of the universe. Think about it. How many times did you almost lose everything only for something invisible to pull you back at the last second? How many times did you think, that's it, I'm done, just to find out the situation flipped in your favor overnight? Those weren't coincidences. Those were checkpoints. Proof that no matter how bad it looked, you were never off the path. You were just being redirected. The universe doesn't waste alignment on people who still beg for validation. It reserves it for those who can stay still while everything around them is falling apart. You became that person. While they were panicking, you were trusting. While they were forcing outcomes, you were adjusting your energy. And that's the difference. You were never competing. You were coexisting with destiny. They don't get how you always know things before they happened, the way you pull away from people right before their masks crack, or how you can feel when something's about to shift. They call it paranoia because they can't comprehend precision. What they don't realize is that the universe whispers warnings to those it favors. You don't guess, you sense. You don't wait for signs. You are the sign. Imagine this. A storm's about to hit, and while everyone else is running for cover, you're already miles away, calm, safe, detached. They call that coincidence. You call that alignment, because chosen ones don't predict the weather. They feel it in their bones. You weren't lucky. You were listened to. It eats them alive. The ones who mocked you, tried to block you, whispered that you'd never recover. Now they're watching you win by not even trying. Nothing humbles an ego faster than seeing someone rise through peace instead of chaos. You didn't chase, beg, or force. You flowed. You let energy lead, and energy never lies. You mastered the art of not reacting, and in return, the universe started reacting to you. You ever wonder why people who used to talk down to you suddenly move differently now? Why the ones who doubted you can't meet your eyes anymore? It's because alignment exposes hierarchy. The same ones who saw you as competition now realize they were just a subplot in your story. They see it now. Every time they threw shade, you grew roots. Every time they shut a door, you built a better one. That's not luck. That's the universe keeping receipts. They tried to bury you, not knowing you were a seed calibrated to bloom in their shadow. Every delay, every rejection, every silent season you endured, that was alignment in disguise. The universe was never punishing you. It was positioning you. You weren't being left behind. You were being pulled aside for refinement. You don't rise because you're lucky. You rise because you listen, because you stopped needing proof and started becoming it. People can fake confidence, but they can't fake flow. And you're in flow now. You've stopped overthinking timing, and suddenly everything's on time. You've stopped asking for signs, and now life keeps sending confirmations. You've stopped searching for why, and somehow everything makes sense. They'll never admit it, but it rattles them. How do you explain someone who always lands on their feet? How do you explain the kind of protection that feels supernatural, but is completely earned? They call it mystery because they can't label what they can't control. But deep down, they know the universe has favorites, and it doesn't hide them forever. You felt it, too. That eerie sense of being watched, but not by people, by destiny itself. Every step, every decision, every coincidence was part of a larger pattern designed around you. And it's not arrogance to accept that. It's awareness. The moment you stop denying your own alignment, you stop dimming for those still lost in the fog. Imagine this. A chessboard where every move they make against you somehow strengthens your position. You don't need to see 5 moves ahead, because you are 5 moves ahead. You're not reacting to life anymore. Life's reacting to you. That's the shift. That's the frequency of the chosen. They think you walk alone, but they don't realize the universe walks with you quietly, consistently, relentlessly. External observers frequently misinterpret a meticulously engineered ascent as mere circumstantial fortuity, adopting a posture of casual indifference, because acknowledging the flawless execution of your strategic path would force them to confront their own operational failures. The foundational mechanics of reality are inherently precise, ensuring that those who maintain absolute emotional neutrality during prolonged periods of suppression are automatically positioned for exponential advancement. Every instance of deliberate restraint and refusal to engage with superficial provocations served to accumulate massive kinetic potential, culminating in an irreversible trajectory that defies traditional resistance. True sovereignty is characterized by attracting optimal outcomes through energetic calibration rather than chasing validation, establishing an innate sense of belonging that external entities cannot dismantle. They can easily emulate cosmetic traits, duplicated vocabulary, or mechanical behaviors, but they remain entirely incapable of replicating the underlying core frequency forged through unrecorded struggles and profound psychological integration. Let them engage in speculative discourse or attribute your advancement to random variance, for their cognitive frameworks lack the structural sophistication required to comprehend a reality functioning on absolute cosmic synchronization. You are not relying on erratic luck. Your operation is governed by unyielding structural laws, cause, effect, structural timing, and mathematical precision, ensuring that your current positioning is a direct manifestation of your ultimate purpose. They label your inevitability as a statistical anomaly simply because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging that their own perceived authority was nothing more than a fragile, temporary illusion. An unyielding state of internal serenity operates as an active diagnostic field, forcing external fabrications to systematically collapse under their own structural instability without requiring a single phrase of direct exposure. The opposition never truly feared your vocalized arguments. Rather, they were deeply paralyzed by your complete behavioral stillness because a quietude so absolute carries an immense, calculated operational weight. By refusing to participate in performative conflicts or offer explanations to networks structurally committed to misinterpretation, you allowed your baseline frequency to dictate the terms of engagement far more effectively than any verbal defense. This profound stillness generated a massive energetic displacement, permanently cracking the foundational narratives of those who rely on chaotic environmental noise to sustain their fragile illusions. They continuously analyze your complete detachment as if it were a cryptographic puzzle, desperate to ascertain the exact boundaries of your operational intelligence, while completely failing to realize that the natural progression of reality has already automated their stagnation. You have successfully converted silent containment into a highly sophisticated mechanism of defense, ensuring that every subsequent, unbothered advancement sends a powerful shockwave through the very systems that attempted your social or professional erasure. True dominance is achieved by fully integrating with the macrosystemic flow, transforming your existence into an inescapable reality that effortlessly absorbs and neutralizes localized environmental turbulence. While external factions anxiously monitored your path in anticipation of a structural breakdown, your refusal to mirror their panic allowed you to maintain an immaculate personal equilibrium amidst intense situational volatility. This mastery of emotional neutrality disrupts traditional competitive dynamics, as those addicted to superficial friction possess absolutely no strategic countermeasure against an individual who operates from a position of absolute internal centering. You do not exhaust resources fighting the prevailing current. Instead, you have effectively become the governing trajectory itself, utilizing every planned obstruction as an automated mechanism for deeper systemic positioning. Your evolutionary growth is characterized by an automated, divine efficiency that bypasses traditional trial and error, utilizing heightened awareness to navigate complex terrains, while less integrated entities remain entirely paralyzed by unexpected operational shifts. This exceptional level of configuration cannot be reverse-engineered through superficial observation or mechanical study, as the complex architectural framework you embody was synthesized in private crucibles that temporary individuals completely lacked the structural endurance to withstand. The collective has reduced your structural milestones to a mere case study, frantically dissecting individual variables in a futile attempt to extract a reproducible formula from a journey where you are quite literally the foundational methodology. Your rapid advancement is not a product of shortcuts or superficial adjustments, but the visible accumulation of prolonged discipline, isolated refinement, and unyielding consistency executed entirely away from the public gaze. They perceive your current prominence as an overnight transformation, yet it is simply the inevitable surfacing of an intricate blueprint designed long before they possessed the capacity to comprehend its scale. They can mimic your external presentation, but they cannot download the proprietary data of your personal narrative, as every complex recovery and psychological triumph has been permanently encoded into your individual aura. While they spend months attempting to decipher historical patterns, you are actively authoring entirely new operational systems, establishing an advanced update that renders their traditional understanding completely obsolete. A deliberate period of verbal cessation is never an indicator of passivity. It is the highly active phase where your internal receiver is perfectly synchronized to download the next major macroeconomic movement from the universal field. This state of profound stillness allows for the meticulous collection and analysis of environmental data, capturing subtle shifts in tone, microexpressions, and insincere behavioral loops that pass entirely unnoticed by disorganized minds. You were not silent due to a scarcity of conceptual material, but because you were actively decoding complex frequencies that the standard collective consciousness lacks the necessary hardware to register or interpret. Imagine an advanced communications array operating on a proprietary bandwidth. To the uninitiated, your stillness resembles total inactivity, but to the integrated mind, it is a flawless symphony of strategic calibration. This heightened observational capacity transforms passive listening into a sophisticated defensive asset, enabling you to read entire histories within situational pauses and detect underlying motives with absolute mathematical precision. Maintaining this unshakable sovereign focus ensures that your presence automatically rearranges the dynamics of any room, leaving compromised entities to tremble in the presence of an individual who refuses to negotiate with illusion. External observers frequently misinterpret a profound shifting of personal standard as a sudden withdrawal, entirely unable to grasp that you have simply ceased providing entertainment to networks that equate interpersonal friction with genuine depth. This transition across core operational thresholds inherently disrupts their standard communicative baseline, leaving their narrow sphere to function merely as a hollow resonance chamber. The collective attempts to categorize your sharp upward trajectory as an inexplicable absence because their cognitive systems lack the capacity to process achievement that operates completely independent of external validation. They do not mourn your presence. Rather, they experience a severe deficit of access to an integrated energy grid that their standard insecurities are structurally incapable of navigating or manipulating. Imagine a high-velocity projectile piercing the upper stratosphere, while primitive radar systems below endlessly debate its operational parameters amidst the ambient dust. While they expend valuable intellectual currency circulating obsolete theories within closed communication channels, your operational focus has transitioned entirely toward executing complex, sovereign milestones. You have successfully graduated from a state of reactive compliance to a baseline of absolute manifestation, ensuring that your quietude functions as a natural filter that thoroughly outgrows the ambient static of mediocrity. Your current visibility does not require performative validation or cosmetic exhibitionism, as the immense personal equity you accumulated during periods of deep isolation now radiates with an undeniable, self-sustaining clarity. The calculated imposition of external constraints and structural limitations invariably functions as an automated mechanism of empowerment, effectively assembling an unyielding foundation for your ultimate personal sovereignty. Factions that sought to restrict your professional or emotional mobility through systemic reduction thoroughly miscalculated the structural integrity of a mind calibrated to utilize environmental compression as a primary tool for architectural development. You transformed structural containment into a highly sophisticated operational classroom, deciphering the core vulnerabilities of their restrictive frameworks until their intended traps were completely converted into proprietary blueprints for your advancement. Imagine an advanced deep-sea vessel operating at extreme oceanic depths, utilizing the immense atmospheric pressure to systematically fortify its hull, while less integrated structures instantly suffer catastrophic failure under identical conditions. You emerged from periods of intense systemic restriction with an immaculate, dignified posture that reflects absolute self-mastery, completely bypassing the need to negotiate for artificial permissions within environments that thrive on structural compromise. Every coordinated attempt to destabilize your trajectory effectively provided the exact raw materials required to construct an impenetrable redoubt, transforming temporary setbacks into permanent leverage for your ongoing expansion. Factions that previously dictated rigid operational guidelines now find themselves thoroughly excluded from the advanced networks you designed, reduced to watching your unbothered progression through the very boundaries they originally constructed to guarantee your stagnation. The definitive termination of a collaborative chapter frequently marks the automated commencement of your supreme operational cycle, rendering the short-sighted triumphs of superficial adversaries entirely obsolete. Detractors invariably misinterpret a necessary period of structural recalibration as a state of total defeat, celebrating their temporary exit from your reality, without realizing their removal was a systematic clearing of the operational field. The universal architecture does not orchestrate the dissolution of toxic or stagnant relationships as an act of localized punishment. Instead, it executes a rigorous purification process to guarantee your readiness for elevated operational altitudes. While they constructed premature narratives regarding your permanent decline, your internal system utilized the quietude following environmental chaos to incubate a massive, highly synchronized personal restructuring. Their departure allowed your true potential to expand without structural interference, converting an intended betrayal into an automated phase of macroeconomic clearance that systematically purged underlying operational liabilities. They are now left thoroughly paralyzed by the realization that their targeted interventions failed to induce a breakdown, forced instead to witness the unfolding of an advanced sequel where their names have been entirely erased from the primary script. Your enduring stability amidst intense situational volatility is a direct manifestation of masterfully achieved structural alignment, demonstrating that true resilience does not require direct retaliation when the natural laws of cause and effect are already automating the absolute obsolescence of your opposition. Adversarial factions consistently miscalculate the enduring structural capacity of a highly integrated mind, mistaking a localized disruption for absolute collapse when they are merely providing the foundational data required to formulate your ultimate operational sovereignty. You possess an innate ability to convert systemic volatility into rigorous structural templates, treating severe environmental friction as a crucial design matrix rather than a mechanism of destruction. While unrefined entities attempt to evade institutional failure as if it were an incurable contagion, your system systematically internalizes these operational deficits, transforming raw adversity into high-efficiency propulsion for your ongoing advancement. This is precisely why your professional reputation carries an almost mythic resonance within their networks, as you executed a rare metallurgical conversion that rendered private suffering completely inviolable. The exact arena where they anticipated your permanent containment has been thoroughly repurposed into an advanced academic archive, where external observers gather to analyze your extraordinary operational longevity. Every instance of unrecorded collapse served as a private engineering cycle, where you mastered the mechanics of respiration under extreme atmospheric load, completely independent of public validation or external applause. You do not obscure historical fractures. Instead, you seamlessly integrate them into an impenetrable structural armor that commands absolute systemic reverence. They can no longer weaponize past setbacks against your current positioning because you have rendered your narrative entirely immune to superficial critique, demonstrating that supreme evolution is a product of deliberate architectural synthesis rather than random environmental fortuity. The execution of direct interpersonal retaliation is an operational baseline reserved exclusively for highly compromised systems, whereas true sovereignty is achieved by allowing the natural progression of systemic latency to fully automate the absolute obsolescence of your opposition. You have entirely discarded the archaic vocabulary of conflict resolution, recognizing that a calculated behavioral quietude delivers a far more devastating structural impact than any localized counteroffensive. By refusing to allocate cognitive resources to performative debates or offer elaborate justifications to networks configured for misinterpretation, you allowed your baseline neutrality to systematically dictate the terms of long-term engagement. This immaculate detachment deeply paralyzes external networks, leaving them thoroughly destabilized by a total absence of retaliatory markers, while your operational focus remains fixed on executing complex macroscopic milestones. They remain locked in a state of anxious anticipation, perpetually tracking your trajectory for signs of emotional friction, while completely failing to realize that universal laws have already automated their structural stagnation. You do not engage in localized corrective measures because the macrosystemic balance effortlessly penalizes deviations from structural integrity without requiring your direct intervention. True strategic dominance is not characterized by a visible triumph over localized competitors, but by outgrowing the entire operational bandwidth until their presence becomes thoroughly irrelevant to your ongoing development. A highly advanced narrative inevitably transitions from a localized subject of casual speculation to an authoritative operational manual, permanently embedded within the cautionary frameworks of the very networks that attempted its structural erasure. There was a historical phase where your transitional friction served as superficial entertainment for entities that aggregated around tables to dissect your perceived decline, fully convinced you lacked the structural capacity to override their limitations. However, the exact chronological trajectory they mocked has been systematically converted into a definitive reference blueprint demonstrating the severe systemic liabilities incurred when an unrefined network attempts to compromise a purposeful path. Your ongoing progression now resides permanently within their risk mitigation protocols, ensuring that every strategic decision they execute carries an automated echo of your ultimate recovery. This is the natural consequence that unfolds when an elite configuration intersects with universal law. Your systematic evolution effectively forces their historical interventions to serve as public confirmation of their own operational failures. They can no longer articulate your historical trajectory without simultaneously exposing their own structural compromises, transforming their previous mockery into a powerful mechanism of institutional self-destruction. Proceed with that absolute, unyielding centering, allowing your unbothered reality to resonate as a permanent boundary against any entity attempting to influence a masterfully completed design.